I'm Dr. Renee Mehrra, and today I'll be talking to my guest on the rich tradition of Indian classical dance that can be traced back to 200 BC. And Indian classical dance has gone through many multi-layered evolutionary cycles, and yet in modern day times, it is solid as a rock, strong as ever, and vibrant as ever. And talking to me all about why Indian classical dance matters and all about the International Dance Day that they had, International Dance Day just recently. Talking to me all the way from Bangalore, India, is Mr. Ashish Mohan Khokar. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Khokar. And Mr. Khokar requires no introduction. He's an eminent dance historian, a very world-renowned art critic, scholar, author of over 43 books in varied subjects, and I believe they're all sold out. So I don't have any chance to read them at this point unless they go for the second edition and third. And he's the editor and co-publisher with his wife, Elizabeth Hall. She's from New York. An annual book on dance. It's called Attendance, and it's in its 22nd year right now. And Mr. Khokar is trained in many Indian classical dance forms, including Bharatanatyam, Kathak, Kuchipudi, Orissi, and Western Ballet. So we have somebody who's such an all-rounder and such a great commentator on Indian dance. So we can talk about why Indian classical dance matters and why is it so strong and why we can continue to be stewards of Indian classical dance forms. So thank you very much, Mr. Khokar, for joining. And before we go to Mr. Khokar, I'm going to be talking to Mrs. Indu Jaiswal, and she's the chairperson for the Indian American Forum, a nonprofit organization that was started in 1997 in New York. And it's about showcasing the rich cultural heritage of India through socio-economic activities that the Indian American Forum has very regularly. So, Mrs. Jaiswal, you want to talk about the importance of our cultural heritage and Mr. Khokar's monumental contribution to Indian classical dance.
First of all, namaste to everyone. Good evening, Dr. Renee Mehrra and Mr. Ashish Khokar. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this unique discussion of Indian traditional cultural dances and the program. Actually, when I was in India, I am a student of Bharati Vidya Bhavan, and I used to do Manipuri dance on the stage. And I also used to play sitar. So I grew up in the culture of Indian music and dance and performance on the stage, and how important it is for us growing up in India, how important it was and how important it is for now when we are in our adopted land. So here in the USA, we have the Indian American Forum. As you mentioned, we are very active in the community in promoting traditional cultural activities and heritage from India. All our programs are based upon showcasing the traditional and the folk dances and music from India. So we are very happy that today we are going to be hearing from Mr. Khokar about the history of all these dances. And our dancers here also, when we have the schools who are training our students, starting all over Long Island, New York, Manhattan, in Bharatanatyam, Kathak, Kuchipudi, all the dances that you've spoken about. We are also, our students here are also performing those dances. So it's very, very important that we hear from Mr. Khokar. And also it's important that, we continue our tradition in USA. And I'm sure that Mr. Khokar from India will be very proud of us for what we are doing over here. Thank you so much for including me in today's talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Jaiswal. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and you brought the U.S. perspective here as how it intersects with our culture and heritage. And Mr. Khokar is right there telling us all about it, because dance is poetry in motion, and dance, music, folklore, they're all just part of our way of life. So we celebrate festivals with dance and music and folklore. So Mr. Khokar, I want to talk to you about how Indian classical dance evolved. We're talking about from the temples to the to the courts of majestic princes, and then now in our mainstream culture. Walk us through that history.
Thank you so much. It is really a privilege and a pleasure to be connected to all Indians and global citizens worldwide through your medium and channel. I am indeed honored and happy to connect despite the time difference and all the logistics. India is cyclic. Indian culture is cyclic. It is not linear from point A to point B, which is why these traditions have survived. So when we think of 2nd century BC, when we think of cultures in that period, the Mesopotamian, the Egyptian, the Greeks, we see a continuity in the Indian civilization, partly because it's a river culture. All riverine cultures, it could be Nile, it could be Ganges, it could be any modern river. All the cultures and civilizations have been based on most critical element, that is water. By definition, water flows. So tradition flows. It is a continuity. So when you think of Indian dance form specifically, one reason it has had this continuum is essentially because it is part of everyday life. It is not delinked from religion. Dances were of divine origins. So we brought in mythology to convey tales to our children, the grandmother's tales which reflected in the scriptures or shastras or traditional knowledge. And thus we took these art forms. The essential setting were the temples. Temples means any places of worship, but I'm talking of 2000 years ago or a continuous in the history as they have evolved through the courts, as you said rightly, in the last 500 years, or in the contemporary times. The beauty of Indian classical forms is that, like everything Indian, it has a lot of democracy, which means it's an ocean. So it depends on what bucket or what mugful one takes or partakes of this culture. I am very proud and happy whenever I visit the States, because what the Indians like you all have achieved and kept the traditions going and teach even on weekend classes, and parents drive their children all the way to acquire Bharatanatyam or Kathak or Bollywood or contemporary. It's a very rich palette which people like you and Induji and others all over America and many other parts of the world take this. So the next issue of attendance I plan is on diaspora, dance in diaspora. And all of you can help me with that, because we need to have an update on what we call Parvasiya Divas. That is one day in a year. But for all us Indians and those who love Indian culture, all our friends internationally, India is in our hearts. Heart. ART is art. It is inbuilt in our hearts. So it is not mind over matter, it is soul over spirit. So the moment we delink body, the beauty of classical forms is that we delink our body and we connect our spirit, which is part of the spirituality. So the word is inbuilt. It's only we've not deciphered and understood it even in the context of English language. Alas, in India, we have so many languages, so many cultures, and Sanskrit is almost lost unless we use it for dance or for music or for Shastric traditions, in rituals, in our worshipping. But the marginalized language still continues through our performing art forms. Coming from the temples, it became a privilege of the courts or the aristocracy or the educated class. And from there, despite our long history of colonial India, 200-300 years, the French came, the British came, the Portuguese came, the Dutch came, everyone came, and we amalgamated with those cultures. So the opera traditions of, say, Italy or France became our operatic traditions of dance drama, which was already there in Mahabharata or Ramayana as an epic tale. So this was a very good bridge linking. The beauty of Indian culture is always amalgamation. It's always cross-fertilization. So there is really no clash of cultures, which is precisely why we have survived 2000 years or more as a continuous cultures. I don't want to say the Greeks have died and the Romans have died. They surely have culturally. But the Indian culture is not just a word, but a continuum only because of fusion, amalgamation of Persian culture, of Asian cultures in the contemporary world, And now with all of you spread all over worldwide, I'm surprised even if I go to north of Sweden or half of Minnesota has many Swedes, or I go to somewhere in Canada or Africa or Mauritius, indigenous, our settled populations. There's such a strong link with these traditions through mythology, epics, dance tales, Krishna, Radha. These becomes almost like characters, personal friends. And in those terms, we are very happy that we are able to sustain this in modern India. The classical and the modern coexist.
Right. We talked about cross-fertilization, and you're talking about, influences like we see in Kathak from north part of India. So there's so much we see of all that all put in together in the Indian classical dance, and that's why it's sustained. And you have been a big champion and very passionate about sustaining, promoting, and preserving these classical dance forms, especially Orissi and Kuchipudi. And I want to also tell our viewers that Mr. Ashish Mohan Khokar is the illustrious son of two big luminaries. We're talking of, this is M.K. Saroja, his mother, and father being Mr. Mohan Khokar, renowned dancers of India, given such priceless gift. And you also are custodian to the treasure trove of archival material. We got these photographs and dance like what used to be before, like Indian classical concert would go on for 4 hours, even perhaps 5 hours. And now they're brought down to maybe an hour and a half or two, because that's what the audience wants. So, the mudras that they had before, they would use a lot of mudras, but now they're using less of them because of time constraints. And yet the dance continues, Indian classical dance continue to remain as vibrant as ever. So tell us, you are championing the cause of preservation of Indian classical dance, and yet we see this kind of changes, there's been a change because that's what the audience wants. So how does that intersect here?
It's a very interesting and a very paradigm shift, partly because of technology, because we're able to speak to each other across miles. I don't have to be in New York City or you in Bangalore or Delhi. So technology has helped tremendously, but technology has also given us diversions. So we have maybe 500 channels on television. Earlier, we didn't have that. So there was no competition to a dance performance of 4 hours. Kathakali was an all-night event. People had dinner by 7. There was no electricity thousands of years ago. They would sit in the oil lamp and they would have an all-night performance. So I would say a rose not without a thorn. That's how technology has helped us, but it's also created diversions. So the attention span, human attention span by definition has become very, very short. So what used to be an all-night performance or the Melam traditions of Kuchipudi or Kathakali or even Manipuri or any of the group art forms, they have now curtailed to maybe 1 hour, maximum 1.5 hours, partly because of distances in cities for people to reach the venues, partly because of traffic in every city, partly because of other modes of entertainment. Earlier, most of us had undivided attention on maybe 1 or 2 choices. We remember growing up in the India of the 1960s or 50s or 70s, there was only one television maybe in a neighbor's house, and there were only 2 channels, and one had to suffer them because there was no choice. But now there's so much choice, and with Netflix and all the other private, players, it is very good palette because you can pick and choose from a vast areas of subject of interest. So it has also affected the human attention span. So what earlier could be one Varnam in, say, in Bharatanatyam for maybe 1.5 hours or 2 hours is now curtailed to 20 minutes because the whole program has to be finished in 1 hour or 90 minutes. So that is the reality of modern lives. Is it good or bad? We are not even judgmental. It just is. So we accept it as is. And we take the best. The glass is always half full. At least there's water in the glass of whatever other beverage. Because if we didn't have even this much art, then our souls will be very poor.
Now, you being trained in classical dance, tell us how these mudras, the abhinaya, the navras, the 9 emotions that we always talk about in dances, give us a little bit of a demonstration of that to those who are uninitiated.
Actually, it's the sign languages. So if I say it's a deer and I'm petting a deer, you can see it's the horns of the deer, the mouth. So they just with fingers. So basically we all have 5 fingers in our hand. Some lucky ones have double thumbs sometimes. But if we take 10, we can say this is authority. This says I am a judge, I have authority. This says Supreme Lord. Anyone says points to the supreme sky. As always, we look to the heavens. I don't know why heavens is not in this direction or maybe in some other direction. So these are actually everyday sign language we use, which are codified in dance. So we have single hand gestures, pataka, tripataka, kartri mukha, or we have some with the double hand gestures. So when we talk of dance gestures, we talk of birds or we talk of fish, or we talk of flying birds. So we have these use of single hand gestures or both hands gestures, which is why the greetings comes also. And in Corona times or COVID times, this has been so useful and effective because the traditions of greeting, I see all dignitaries from abroad now doing namaskaram or namaste, which was age old here. And we got into this massive world cultures of shaking hands or hugging, which is also nice human contact. But this saves us now from many other viruses and germs. So it was invented 2000 years ago. So I think there was a brilliance of the mind of Indians. You see, the Indian mind is its biggest contribution. When you think of grammar, Panini, when you think of yoga as a concept, when you think of sun worshipping, Sweden also worships sun. I have lived in Sweden, I worked in Norway, Germany, France, Italy, many tours to America and rest of the world. I see it is only one sun. That one sun revolves, earth revolves around it, and how we perceive it. Likewise, the spirit of art, different forms, Kathak, Bharatanatyam, Orissi, Kuchipudi, even contemporary dance, nothing wrong with it because they are all human expressions.
Right. Now, you are the editor and co-publisher with your wife, as I mentioned earlier on, Elizabeth Hall Khokar. It's a yearbook on dance called Attendance, and it's in the 22nd year. So congratulations, because it provides new insights and perspectives. It's a great way to disseminate information and best way to outreach. This is the greatest way. Does it frame new conversations on dance and the new trends, the present trends and where the futuristic trends are going to be in dance?
Yes, that's very critical because when we're teaching at universities, I'm a visiting professor to 3. My father was founder head of Baroda University, MSU, dance department. Then he was in Delhi. So I teach at Bangalore, Pune, Baroda, sometimes Michigan. I visit Ann Arbor or sometimes, near Chicago. And of course, in India, Mauritius. When I teach, I realize that the questions young people ask are about contemporary disciplines. Classical, they have imbibed, but the questions which concern us are modern or young responses. So when they ask, we have to think also and think what is really a very meaningful exchange with them. It's not that we talk to students, we learn from students. So when we think of special issue of attendance, 15 years ago, we had done an issue on choreography. Now in India, choreography, the spelling is C-H-O-R, was also chor, which meant a thief. You could take somebody's item or some form, mix and match often. So it was also a joke that are you choreographing or you're choreographing, which meant you could partake of each other's item or song or music by your leave or without copyright issues. So choreography as a subject we attended many years ago. We took up traditions of Northeast India, the 7 sisters, Nagaland, Manipur, Tripura, Assam. We focused on that. We took up now issues of Pan-Asian cultures, South Korea, Vietnam, Philippines, Japan, China, all these Pan-Asian cultures. And a future issue will be diaspora of dance in USA. Because believe me, USA is not one issue. It needs volumes of issue. And internet does help because there's a lot of material information. But seeing is believing. Dikhya, Sikhya, Parikhya. जो अपनी आंखों से हमने देखा नहीं, what we have not seen with our eyes, जो अपने कानों से हमने सुना नहीं, what we have not heard from our ears, and जो हमने अपने आप परीक्षा नहीं, what we have not able to witness and ascertain and experience for ourselves, दीखिया सीखिया परीक्षा, ये मूल मंत्र है, that we should take all three into account. So dance in diaspora is a future issue, and I hope all of you help those who are listening in. Please get my coordinates from this channel, this very effective medium of Renee ji, and please connect so you can give ideas of which are good institutions which are working, at least 20 years of potential, future and last 20 years of work. No fly by night, no last night or last weekend studio, but something which has done. We have many American pioneers. In fact, Indian contemporary dance wouldn't have happened without the pioneering modern dance father figure Ted Shawn and Ruth St. Denis coming to India in the 1920s on a ship. We fly for 40 hours and we get tired now and we complain. They came on a ship for 2-3 months, sailing with a company of 40 dancers, Ted Shawn, Lameri, Anne Pavlova from England and Russia, so many of these pioneers. They opened our eyes to the beauty of Indian dances submerged under long colonial rule. So we salute them, pioneers of America, especially because it was the most modern country. Modern dance started in America only because the response was not for classical, but for something new. So America can teach us a lot and we can learn lots. And that's why Indians are doing so well, because there's an amalgamation again in that culture.
That's right. It's an amalgamation of ideas, amalgamation of influences. There's so much one can learn from each other. Now we live in this age of globalization, in the digital age. So things, as you said, pick up so easily, as long as there's no plagiarism, which you said so very rightly. The International Dance Day, the biggest, I think, hype that we have in India, and it's been happening for many years now. Of course, for the pandemic, it did not happen for 2 years. And you're right there, curating. There were so many dancers, and we had the former ambassador of UNESCO in Paris who had also come, for the inauguration, and attendance launched his 22nd year. So walk us through that, share that whole glory that happened just recently.
Actually, last 2 years, we were only looking at each other virtually. We missed humanoids, as they say. We didn't have connect with a hall, with an auditorium. We could not enter a film show or a dance show or a music show. It was virtual. So I think there's an ennui, a certain boredom or a certain fatigue. So this was first ever coming together of over 108 dancers, just as we speak. We are on a time difference. We've just started the World Dance Day here. It's the 29th of April in India and 28th so we're just in transition. We have on the eve of the biggest assembly. And I do that because 3 generations get together. The senior gurus who are above 70, the younger ones of 20, 30 years old can partake from their experience in life, and the younger in between 40 to 50 to 60 years old who have had experience and exposure can still share with audiences their learning and how they teach. So it was a coming together of so many of us, and it was very heartening to see all age groups there. And of course, with masks, because it's mandatory, we continue to do that in India. And I think for a country of 1 billion plus, it is very important that we keep as safe as we can. And mask is the first step and the only step of self-protection and being civil and cultured to others. It's just a piece of cloth. Why can't, if we have it, it saves so many. So we insisted we do that. Of course, dancers on stage had the license not to do that because it clashed with their accoutrements, the costume, and the aharya, which is so beautiful. And I would say attendance means hazri, attending dance. The idea rose from Henry V, oh Lord, I dance attendance here. So it is very modern, connects to classical world, both in literature and in form. To maintain a dance journal or yearbook for 20 plus years without single rupee or dollar from corporate India or from a government of India, they don't support anything. It's just people. So it's truly a people's festival. It's truly an artist event. I'm only the anchor, the helper, the sutradhar, because it's easy for me to string together all the pearls and put a nice pendant of diamonds, some senior stars and gurus, and then share it with the society. It is our we're also telling society that while film has far more outreach, say Bollywood, it's a mass medium, classical arts in any civilization, Greeks, Roman, wherever, chamber music, opera, was always the preserve of a few, not because of elitism, but because of access to literature, music, and the contextual learnings of painting or what was the background. So classicism doesn't mean elitism. It just means 3S: Shastra, Sangeet, Sahitya, traditional scriptures, music, and an awareness of its literary background. So we were very happy. I think the whole city, as many can turn up in the COVID protocols. And we were very privileged to have the ambassador from UNESCO, Shri Chiranjeev Singh ji, many artists, stars, and to see young India. We had this 7-year-old to the 80-year-old. I am the youngest in that group because my birthday comes once in 4 years. So I refuse to grow up, but still I had a good time and everyone enjoyed it. Thank you.
That is great. Now we know your birthday is February 29th. Tell us, we know there are many challenges to make Indian classical dance form, or any classical dance, when, you know, even if it's Western ballet or something, you know, the challenges that we face to bring it in mainstream culture. Do you feel that fusion can be partially an answer, or the purists might say fusion creates confusion? What's your take on that?
It is very valid point you raise. And when we used to listen to fusion music 20, 30 years ago, and my elder brother figure, Dr. L. Subramaniam, maestro worldwide known for his symphonies of fusion, he's a genius. He produced many such ensemble works. In music, it would work because musicians had notation. So notation is universal. But in dance classical forms, the system of notation only applies to that form in terms of matra, or in terms of scale, or in terms of rhythm, which is very intensive to Indian classical dance. Western music is melody driven. Indian music is rhythm driven. So to make the twain meet is also a challenge. But Bollywood, I would say, is a popular example. I won't be judgmental and say bad or good. But in classical forms, my question is, if you eat a hamburger, should it taste like hamburger or like a dosa? The choice is yours. Dosa is dosa, chole bhature is chole bhature, pizza is pizza, and hamburger is hamburger. The minute you flatten out a hamburger and palm it off as a pizza, no one would believe it. And the minute you roll up a pizza and make a round ball and stuff it with something, same stuffing, no one would take it for a hamburger. Likewise, fusion has this unique situation. So one, I would say, it's best water remains water, ink remains ink, beverages remain beverages. Otherwise, the identity of that form is totally lost over a period of time. Look at the Japanese, how well kabuki, how well Noah traditions are preserved. If they had mixed and merged in the last 1,000 years, the whole tea ceremony, it's just tea, but it's a ceremony. So why one cannot have tea? We have tea all the time, or coffee, or what you will. But the essence of the flavor of that form should remain.
Very true, absolutely. You also have a dance academy in Paris.
Paris, I would say, is the epicenter of European culture, partly because of, again, patronage. It is most modern with classicism, a bit like India, very old and very young. So it has a continuous culture. Most importantly, I think French by design, by mind, have also supported a lot of Asian arts. And a good example is my mother, M.K. Sarojaji. She's all of 92 now. And she has over 200 students in Paris. And her students started Mandapa, the biggest cultural institution for Indian and Asian arts, which even our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, recently went and gave her the Padma Shri because she could not come here. That's my mother's student getting a Padma Shri by the hands of the current and very popular leader of the masses, Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, who personally, when he was in France last year, gave it to her. Alas, we've just lost her to COVID. So please wear masks, I repeat again. It looks insignificant, but it's important. And be vaccinated. Non-vaccinators have a point of view, but she was not vaccinated, so that has its own limitations. But Paris is important for exchange. Paris is important as a door to Europe. Paris is important for India because of cultural exchange. Our World Dance Day, actually the International Day for Dance is designated so for the Jean Nouvel, who was the French ballet master, who revived the art of ballet in the 17th, 18th century, which is why UN designated as the International Day for Dance. It is after the French ballet master. So France has always set the tone. In history, I was a student of history at Delhi University. I taught, I'm a product of Bharati Vidya Bhavan, our school, where we had also the branch in Bangalore function yesterday, and Induji, the dynamic leader of the Indian community, pan-Indo-American community like you in America, is also an alumnus and a senior from that school in Delhi. The beauty of this cross-cultural fertilization was this, that we brought everyone together, we took everyone forward.
Lastly, do you feel, Mr. Khokar, that do you envision the next generation carrying the classical roots and breaking new ground?
Yes, young India and young Indians and young worldwide audience are very smart. We were dummies, we were dumb, we were duffers, we were slow. I almost call myself, in many ways, I'm technologically challenged, even otherwise. But young people everywhere are very, very driven. They are so privileged, they don't realize they have technology at their disposal. They have good economies in most countries. They have good parents who indulge them and pay their fee often for dance or music or any hobby. So I think it depends on parents also, because parents set the tone of the value system. Even if they're modern societies, it's when you're growing up, if you're shown an artwork, if you're taken to a museum, if you're taken to a circus, if you're taken to a cricket or baseball match, it's the parents who inculcate you in those disciplines of fine variety life has to offer. I would first hold the parents responsible to partake and expose children to any culture. Then it is up to the child to develop it as a form, as a skill. When skill becomes established after a good teacher, it becomes the craft. The craft becomes art after experience. So it's a progression. I would say young people will take it forward. I'm confident. It also helps in India that we are so many. So even if you take 1% of people doing it, it is still 10 million people doing something. So it helps that art form continues. The problem is the flip side. Too many of them. So where are the avenues to perform? Earlier we had three greats: Ram Gopal, Uday Shankar, maybe Mrinalini Sarabhai. Next generation had three more names: Vajayanti Mala, Rukmini Devi, Arundel, Bala Saraswati. Then the next generation had M.K. Saroja, Kamla Lakshman, Kalanidhi Narayan. So every generation there were 3 or 5 masters and stars in any form. Now we have 500. And Facebook and social media makes you an instant star because your outreach is so vast. So it is for the audience to decide what they stay with. Ultimately, a good book travels. Even my bad book's 46th was released yesterday. I don't know how, coming from a very ordinary school, one could go so far. But this is why we believe in our deities, Saraswati ki Kripa. When we worship nature or elements, the divine forces give us strength and make even the impossible possible.
That's right. Well, thank you very much. And Mrs. Indu Jaiswal, I think you should have him come as a keynote speaker on Indian dance very soon to New York.
Well, Mr. Khokar, my God, what I would say the collection of art and wisdom and culture and the information that he has is really, really commendable. We are very proud of him. And Ashishji, we would love to invite you to USA. We will have him here in USA. He has been to USA. He has been to the Lincoln Center and all over, as you know. So after now we are through pandemic, and let's hope that very soon we will have Mr. Khokar personally in our in USA. Thank you, Renu, so much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Indu Jaiswal. chair of the Indian American Forum in New York, USA, and Mr. Khokar, who's a dance historian and art critic, a scholar, author, custodian to the Mohan Khokar, material, the archival material of his father and his mother, Mrs. M.K. Sarojaji, as well as the editor and publisher of the yearly dance magazine called Attendance. And I think, as you rightly said, Mr. Khokar, I think it behooves all of us to be ambassadors of Indian classical dance and music so that we can carry this torch. And because dance matters. And when the body dances, it's the soul that actually dances. So we are going to keep that soul alive, sustain it, promote it, nourish it, nurture it, and preserve it for many, many generations to come. I am Dr. Renee Mehrra. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy, stay positive. Thank you.